Hello and welcome back to NoBS. Today we return to talking about the United States election and the voting process, specifically what the Democrats have been trying to do to finagle their way into some kind of cheat to make them win because they know they're going to lose. They really have no luck and no pull anymore. I mean, they control the media and the internet and big tech, but as far as the public eye and the public perception, Democrats are really going downhill. Everyone can see that they're violent, they're crazy, they're unhinged. Their politicians are really old and falling apart. They're like zombies walking around out there, like Weekend at Bernie's kinds of politicians. Quite literally, one of them is named Bernie Sanders, of course, but that's besides the point. Today, we're talking about voting again, and we're talking about how their recent angle is backfiring on them. Recently, the Democrats have been trying to push mail-in voting. They want everyone to vote by mail because they know that's an easier way for them to cheat, but there is a big problem with that they just discovered kind of recently. Most recently, we talked about how that they already got caught cheating, so that was a big problem, and it's bringing more scrutiny onto these mail-in votes, which is actually causing this whole plan to backfire on them, and they're starting to what they call pivot now. They're pivoting to a new strategy. They want people to in-person vote now, and it's basically because the mail-in system isn't as easy and bulletproof as they thought. Sure, there's a chance they could cheat, but if they can't cheat, it's actually going to hurt their chances, because if a lot of Democrats do mail-in voting, there's a lot of chances they can mess that up. Mail-in voting isn't 100%. You have to get it right. You have to fill out your form right and do all the things on the checklist. You have to put your name in, blah, blah, blah. It has to go through the mail. There's just a lot more variables and a lot more chances for things to go wrong. And as they discover that, they try to pivot back to in-person voting. So we're going to talk about this story today soon. We're going to get over all the details, give you guys the whole gist, and talk about my thoughts on it as well. But first, let's take a quick moment to check out our sponsor. Hey guys, today I want to offer you another one of these awesome free gold coins. This time it's the firefighter coin. This time we're supporting our boys in red, the ones we call when we need safety and help when things go wrong at our house or somewhere we work. When there's a fire, we call the fire department, and there's no better way to support America's firefighters than getting one of these free gold coins. All you have to do is pay for shipping, and one of these awesome firefighter coins can be yours today. It's a really great deal. It's an awesome offer coming from the Brave Patriot. They're great with these gold coins. They have lots of cool offers and styles, and today's no different. All you have to do is pay for shipping, and you can get this awesome firefighter coin and support these guys who really support our neighborhoods and our country. Thanks for your time today. Hopefully you check out our exclusive link below if you're interested. And now back to the show. Great, now that that's out of the way, let's check out this article. This is from Twitchy. I really love their post version on Twitter because of this picture. But first, let's read the title. It says, "Backfire in progress. Axios reports Democrats begin emergency pivot to encourage in-person voting. Guess why?" And then you got this picture of Ross from Friends, and they're moving this couch, and Ross was yelling pivot in that scene. It's a really funny scene. I actually just explained it to my wife too, so I'll tell it to you. Basically, Friends is a funny sitcom from the 90s. This is Ross. They're trying to move a couch, and it was just a funny bit because everyone's been in this situation where you've tried to move a couch or some furniture, and you kind of get stuck in a hallway or a door or something like that. And here Ross is yelling pivot because they're kind of stuck in the staircase, and he just goes pivot, 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 and they're trying to like squeeze it in, and it's just not working. And that's also a meme that's still used today. They're using it for the Democrats because now they have to pivot. They have to pivot away from mail-in votes because, as I was saying in the intro, there's just way more ways to get disqualified, and that's not illegal. That's not like the government trying to pick sides or something like that. It's just it's harder to vote by mail. You got a lot of variables. You've got things to fill out properly. You have to seal the letter, send it through the mail. The mail has a lot of variables. It could get dropped there or anything, but then when it actually makes it, they have to make sure it's all done properly. And if it's not, they could lose that vote. They'll just disqualify it and move on to the next vote. And that's just how the process works. It's just more problems. Now let's read on to the article. It says, after many weeks of the Democrats with gleeful assistance from the media promoting mail-in voting, in part because they claimed in-person voting could be too dangerous because of COVID, the Dems are starting to shift their recommendation. Democrats pivot to promote in-person voting. As this article says, this is from Jonathan Swan sharing an article from Axios. Axios is like this new media company. I've heard about them a few times recently. They're super far left from what I could see. And I think they have like a show on HBO or something too. They're kind of like wannabe Vice or something like that. They've got a weird name for sure. But let's read on and see what's going on. This John Swan guy says another thing here. He says, the high disqualification rate for absentee ballots poses poses a special peril for Democrats. So that's the disqualification rate I was talking about. If you don't fill it out right, if your ballot has like a smudge on it, or like you've accidentally checked 2 boxes, like you can't erase on the ballot too. So it's like you got one chance to fill it out right, which is another thing. So the Democrats are slowly realizing that. And since they're the ones that encourage mail-in voting, they are more likely to have Democrats voting by mail, which means more of their votes could get disqualified. That's the whole thing. That's the kicker. That's why it's backfiring on them, and they're doing this last minute pivot. The article says, you don't say that Dems seem to be sensing some measure of backfire on the horizon. Democrats for months, oh my God, in-person voting is too dangerous. Trump wants people to die. Democrats learn their voters are too stupid to follow mail-in ballot instructions. Democrats now, we need to vote in person. It's the safest way. Yeah, it's a total 180. It's a total flip-flop, and you can see why. I mean, this makes sense. Like, these people are not sending their brightest. They are some very, very low IQ people, as Trump would say. And that's the way it is. I mean, if you're not smart enough to fill out your ballot, you're going to get disqualified. You're going to lose your vote. And since a lot of Democrats were pushing for this, and a lot of them are dumb, they're realizing that this is a failed system that's going to maybe cause them to lose even more. Here's another tweet. This summer, Democrats and media demand wide access to mail-in voting, claiming the virus is making in-person voting dangerous. Now in the fall, Dems, realizing their base might struggle to follow directions, thus invalidating thousands of ballots, are advocating for in-person voting. Amazing. So he's responding to this Jonathan Swan guy. This isn't that article from the beginning. And yeah, it's really funny too. It's a real funny reaction to see them flip-flop, and just like so shamelessly too. Like, they're not explaining it or like, giving us an apology or something like that. I mean, I'm not begging for an apology, but it's just really funny to see this play out. Imagine how much more successful the Democrats might be if they could avoid falling into their own traps. Impossible to overstate how a pivot like this after the mailbox fetishism that went on for about 15 minutes makes people numb to that type of reaction regardless of its merit. Yeah, this reminds me, like he was talking about how you just remember like a few weeks back, and they were like kissing the butt of the Postal Service. Like, for some reason, Democrats started putting mailmen on like a pedestal, acting like the USPS was like the end all be all. They were like all freaked out about those mailboxes getting, taken away. Like, some lady thought someone was stealing votes whenever a mail van was getting towed to get repairs. That was actually another video we made about that actress who thought that was happening. So they spent all this time propping up the mail-in voting and the mail service, and then now they're flip-flopping, and it's just so impossible to overstate how the pivot like this looks so bad, like this guy in the last tweet said. Have they freed that person who chained themselves to a mailbox? Yeah, that was another thing. Like we were saying, they just glorified all this mailing stuff. They tried to prop up the mail department, and it just came off really lame, and then now they're backpedaling and just kind of abandoning that whole line of thought. Somewhere, a final activist tearfully unchains himself from a mailbox. That's more about the chains. They sought and were granted a stay on any and all efficiency improvements from a world-renowned logistics expert. What were the Dems thinking? They don't always exactly think things through, because the narrative du jour takes precedent over any potential consequences down the road. Yeah, I think that's a good point, because it feels like the Democrats, they don't act in a way where they think they're going to have any consequences. They're just like so used to always getting their way and always having like the media and everyone on their sides, that like once they get a little backlash and a little consequence, it like hits them way harder. It's kind of like one of those girls, those like pretty girls you might have known in like school or something, that just no one ever says no to them, and they always get their way, and there's always like guys trying to like fawn over them and take them out and stuff like that. So it's kind of like that with the Democrats. They're like, I would say they're like a pretty girl, but they're not pretty. Obviously, they're actually way not as good looking as conservative ladies. Speaking of which, here's a picture of Kayleigh McEnany on the side of this article. She's a stunner. She's a conservative. All the hot chicks are conservatives for some reason. I mean, it makes sense when you think about it, but essentially, back to the analogy, Democrats are kind of like that hot chick who's never been told no before. Like, they've never experienced the real world and had to like work or fight for anything. So they don't even like think about consequences. That's how those people act. Like, when they don't have consequences their whole lives, they just act like they're not going to have them. And that's where they're getting this backlash now. And that's why it's backfiring on them in this voting situation. This person in Clem Media is laughing, saying the polls didn't look good. Everyone's responding to this Swan tweet. It says, remember the post office freak out? Remember the mail trucks? I remember. This is actually a joke from South Park, I believe. The Member Berries episode where they're like, do you remember Star Wars? Do you remember this? Remember that? It was a South Park joke a couple couple of years ago where they're like, we're just joking about how everything's nostalgic these days. Like everything like flashes back. You know, there's like a reboot of Star Wars. There's a reboot of Blade Runner. Like that's just the movies, but it's like that in a lot of media, a lot of TV. They're like doing these throwbacks. But yeah, I think you guys get that joke regardless. That's just a little context. You guys ready for the Orange Man is trying to destroy the sacred post office thread yet? Yeah, more about the post office. This is a meme with the, of course, AOC crying at a mailbox. And it's, you know, taken from that scene where she was like posing in front of a detention camp, I believe, a place where they put criminals that illegally try to cross the border. She was trying to act all woke that day. That's a famous image of her used on the post office. And yeah, I think you guys get the point. You know, the mail-in voting has certainly backfired. Now we know why. It's funny because the Democrats know that their base isn't smart enough to properly fill out ballots now. So they have to come and reframe this whole story. It's coming from this Jonathan Swan guy. Let's check out that article real quick. This is that Axios website we're talking about. It says, Democrats spent the early months of the virus pandemic urging their base to vote absentee. As threats of U.S. Postal Service delays, Team Trump litigation, and higher ballot rejection rates become clearer, many are pivoting to promote more in-person voting as well. Why it matters, Democrats are exponentially more likely to vote by mail than Republicans this year, and if enough mail-in ballots are lost, rejected on a technicality, or undercounted, it could change the outcome of the presidential election or other key races. Driving the news in Colorado, Governor John Hickenlooper, that's a cool name by the way, who's running against Senator Cory Gardner, not as cool a name, told Axios that he's encouraging voters to physically take their mail-in ballots to a drop box and to do so early, really early. Here's a quote from Biden officials. They say they always encourage people to vote however they are most comfortable and that they've never exclusively stressed one method or another. So that's kind of like taking the neutral angle. I think Biden and the campaign have been alerted about this and they probably see it coming. They see some backlash coming. I feel like that could be the thing that puts Trump over the edge. You know, it's like, it sounds crappy too, like on a technicality. I get it, like, but that's just how it works. I mean, if you can't fill out the ballot right, you're not voting properly, then it's not going to get counted. That's just how it works with anything. Like if you fill out a form at the DMV and you don't put the right numbers on there, they'll send it back to you. And you know, if you have say you're buying a house and you're filling out the loan application, if you don't do it right, you're not going to get the loan. And that's why you got to do this stuff carefully. That's why, you know, you got to do stuff in person too. It helps to have a person at the polling station. They can show you how to vote. They can show you what boxes to check. They can even, you know, give you a new ballot if your first one went wrong or something like that. Like sometimes you kind of punch the wrong hole and then you got to discard that ballot and start a new one. That's not something you could do by mail. So this all makes sense. It's funny to see it backfire on the Democrats. And I think it was good to go over and a good laugh for us all. Thanks for watching today, guys. Hope you enjoyed today's video. Make sure you comment your thoughts on everything below. Also hit that like button, subscribe if you're new, and hit the bell for notifications too. Until next time, have a great day.